PDX Guitar Freak here, and this is my lesson on how to play the guitar solo from the song Wait by the band White Lion. The song was from their 1987 album Pride, which thanks to the song Wait became a hit early in 1988 after MTV started playing it around the clock. And it featured the guitar playing of guitarist Vito Bratta, who because of this album ended up on the top of several major guitar magazine readers' polls that year. And there were some people, though, however, that dismissed him as just another Eddie Van Halen copycat because of the finger tapping stuff that he did. But there were a lot of things that set him apart from the other guys that like to emulate Van Halen. First of all, he did more than just the repeating triplet eruption stuff. I mean, he did, as you'll see in this solo, some very interesting tapping things. In addition, he was also a very competent rhythm player and a great songwriter, and these were things that also helped him stand out from the pack of dime a dozen shredders that emerged in the latter half of the 80s. So let's start with a brief analysis of the musical theory behind the solo. So the chords behind the solo consisted of A major, A7, notice the G note there, it's going to come into play later a lot, a D with a low A as the root, that's what that /A signifies, and then a D minor added second with the low A thrown in there. In respect to scales, there isn't a particular scale that Vito is using throughout the solo, and the important point to point out here is that really what he's doing is he's playing over the chord, meaning he's not concerned with just staying within a particular scale. He's playing notes that fit well with whatever chord he's playing at the time. Now if you remove the D minor added second chord, the rest of the chords work very nicely with the A mixolydian scale, which Vito stays in throughout most of the solo, which is different than your standard A major scale in that the 7th note is flatted, so the G sharp is brought down to G. A major looks like this. And A mixolydian looks like this, where you take that 7th note and drop it down. And that's why I emphasized earlier when I was showing the chords that G note, because that's what distinguishes the A mixolydian scale from the A major scale. However, again, Vito, while he stays within that mode for most of the solo, he also throws in the G sharp note at one point, which is in the A major scale, not in the A mixolydian scale. And then at one point over that D minor added second chord, he throws in the F note, which is part of that chord, which you're not going to find in either A major or A mixolydian. In fact, you won't find the F note in any of the major flavored or themed modes within the A major scale. So if you're confused, that's probably a good thing, because again, the most important thing I want to emphasize on the theory portion of this lesson is that Vito's not concerned with staying within a scale. He's playing over the chords, which really is the better way to approach soloing. Although I know it can be difficult at times when you're playing, really fast-moving chords and stuff. It's well worth the effort to give it a shot. So for section 1, it's where the finger tapping starts, but of course doesn't end. And one thing I should talk about first is the method of finger tapping. I like to use my index finger, but you may use your middle finger, whatever is comfortable for you. And there's a technique called palming the pick, which is important if you don't do a lot of finger tapping, because obviously you don't want to throw your pick or put it in your mouth when you tap. I mean, you could, but most experienced players will find a way of moving the pick out of the way while still holding it. And the way I do it is I actually hold it between my thumb and this part of my middle finger right here. So as I'm picking, I'll quickly move it like that. You can see the motion. It quickly moves right into that spot, and then I can do my tapping, and then I can quickly move it back into the picking position. Now, the most important thing, you don't need to follow what I do, but that's just the way I do it, and I find it's very quick in order to, again, move the pick in and out of the position, the palming position. And you'll see later in the solo that I actually will pick a note as I'm palming it, which might seem kind of awkward, but it worked for me in this case. Okay, another thing about the tapping here is you'll notice, for example, in this first lick, that my left hand is, you may not notice this, but my left hand's doing a lot of the work. Anytime I'm doing a bend while I'm holding a tap or a vibrato, it may look like it's coming from, the bend may look like it's coming from this finger, or that it's helping, but it's not. It's all coming from this finger over here. So for the first lick, a lot of people will, after they pick that first note, and then they tap, they'll keep this hand down here, and then slide up, while they're still holding it there and doing the vibrato. But you'll notice my hand moves up here, and I do that for a couple of reasons. One is that I find that when I do that, I have better control of the bend because I'm closer to it, closer to the note that's being picked. And when I slide up here, I find that the further my hand is up the neck, the better this note down here is going to ring out and sustain, because I use slightly higher action than most guys do who play this kind of music, because, well, it just sounds better with higher action. It may be more difficult to play, but it sounds a little better. Notes ring clearer and louder. So again, I'll quickly move up to about the 9th fret, do the bend, and then slide the finger up here and do the vibrato. And again, the bend and the vibrato are all coming from the left hand, not the right hand. So you'll notice at the beginning of this section there's a ghost note of 21, and really what that is that's where you left off on the 21st fret of the last lick when you had slid up to it. I found that when I tried to cut this solo up into sections that I tried to do it in a most logical way possible, but this is such a fluid solo where everything kind of blends together, all the sections, that it made it kind of difficult. So anyway, you had left off at the 21st fret where you've tapped. You pull off to the open G, hammer on the 6th, 7th, and then 9th frets, tap onto the 14th fret of the G string, pull off to the 9th fret, and then pull off to the 7th fret. And the next one, you tap onto the 12th fret to do that bend up. You're also going to tap onto the 9th fret. Don't really tap on, but that's where you're going to do the bending. Remember what I talked about, the left hand doing all the work? So watch this. So notice that it looked like I was at the same time tapping onto the 9th fret and the 12th fret. That's because the 9th fret is where you're holding the left hand and bending up. And then when you pull off the 12th fret, you're pulling off to that bent 9th note fret. And then tapping onto the 19th fret, and then coming down. Again, that 9th fret bend is where you're doing a lot of that work behind the scenes. this next section, again, you see that ghost note at the beginning. That's because that's where we left off last time. And you pull off from that 19th fret tap to the 9th fret to the 7th fret, and then hammer on back to the 9th fret. But where I last left it off, I had been using my pinky on the 9th fret. So when I pull off to the 7th fret and then hammer back onto the 9th fret, I'm actually going to hammer on with my ring finger, because that makes it easier for the next part. So it'll look like this. And then you do the 2 half-step bends. And on the second one, you're going to hold it while you tap onto the 13th fret. And while you're still holding that 9th fret half-step bend, and you tap onto the 13th, then you pull off to the 9th like this. And then come back down to the original 9th note position. Now the reason I had you switch over to the ring finger is because next, to facilitate this next lick a little bit easier. And then you hammer on to the 12th fret, pull off to the 7th, hammer on to the 10th, and then quickly pull off to the 7th, slide down to the 6th, do a quick bend, and then the 7th fret of the D string like this. So that once you pull off from the 10th fret to the 7th, you're quickly moving into that 6th fret half-step bend. So at the end of this section, there's what I like to call it a touched harmonic versus a tapped harmonic, even though you're using your tapping in your right hand. So instead of pulling up and aggressively tapping the harmonic, what you're doing is you're pulling up and lightly touching the 22nd fret bar, or the string right above the 22nd fret bar, to create that harmonic before you come back down. If you were to tap it really hard, it would sound a little bit different. It sounds a little smoother when you just lightly touch it to create that harmonic. In the next section, you're going to do a half-step bend at the 14th fret, then release it, and then bend back up a half-step. And while you're holding that 14th fret half-step bend, you're going to apply some hammer-on or finger taps and pull-offs. And while you're finger tapping some of the notes, you're going to do some vibrato. And again, that vibrato comes from the left hand, not the right hand, while you're tapping like this. So again, you'll notice that when I'm doing that vibrato, when I'm tapping, it's coming from that left hand. This next section, it's a little quirky, some of the phrasing in here, and when you look at the tabs, it looks like I'm doing this. Two things I want to point out. When you're coming out of that half-step bend, it's really a really quick half-step bend followed by a vibrato like this. And then when you do the slide from the 12th to the 8th fret, it's a quick slide, so you don't really hesitate in there. In the second half of that lick, again, you apply that quirky, quick 14 fret half step bend followed by vibrato. Now this next section is pretty straightforward except for one part where I do that artificial harmonic. So you start by tapping onto the 9th fret of the A string, pulling off to the open A, hammer onto the 5th fret, tap onto the 9th fret, pull off to the 5th, apply a vibrato, then you move up to the D string, hammer onto the 12th fret, pull off to the open D string, hammer onto the 7th fret, and then you go up to the 14th fret of the G string, tapping, pull off to the 7th fret, hammer onto the 9th fret, and then when you tap onto the 14th fret, and then there's a quick artificial harmonic after that, this is the part that really challenged me and challenges a lot of people who try to do it. To get that artificial harmonic afterwards, you're not going to do a double tap like that. You could, but you have to do it really quick. What you should do is, when you tap on, you should pull off to create the harmonic. And to do that, obviously to get a harmonic, you've got to be, well in this case, you need to be over the 14th fret bar. So as you're tapping onto the 14th fret, you pull off toward the fret bar to create that harmonic. It's kind of a bitch, excuse me, but to get that part down. And then from there he does this pattern like this. Now in this section, you had left off by hitting that 10th fret of the B string, and then you slide up to the 15th fret and apply vibrato before going into the next part. You'll notice in the part where I'm doing the 12-14-12-14 pattern that if I wanted, I could have barred my finger across the 12th fret of the B and E strings, but really I prefer not to bar when I don't have to, because I don't want the notes to blend together. It has a different sound to it. Here's what happens when I bar them together and play that lick. Doesn't sound too bad, but when you play the notes individually one-on-one, it sounds better. You have better note articulation. Alternate way to play that section is to finger tap it. At the beginning, you slide up with your tapping finger to the 15th fret. Probably easier for most people to play. In this last part, this last section, there's a couple ways to play it. And the way I play it, you've noticed, is I finger tap it. And again, you'll notice that the vibrato is coming from the left hand. And one thing you might also notice is that when I do that tap on the 21st fret, and then I hit the note twice. I'm not tapping it twice, I'm keeping my finger on there. I'm actually picking it while I have it tapped. So remember how I showed you how I palm the pick before and how I keep it right there? Well, that allows me to strike the string while I have it tapped. I'm picking it behind the scenes. I know it's kind of awkward for some people, but that's the way I do it. But probably the most common way I see people play this ending lick is actually just to pick the notes like this. And notice that when I do it, again, I'm not keeping all of the notes fretted at the same time, like as if I was doing a chord. I play each note one at a time, so there's no blending. If I didn't do that, it would sound like this. I don't know, it doesn't sound too good to me when you do it that way. And then finally, there's another way you could probably play that with a wide stretch. You could go like this. And I did bar it there because it's pretty tricky not to bar it in that case. So as you can see, there's many different ways you can play that ending lick, and you could probably say that for the rest of the solo. I find that when I'm learning solos, and oftentimes I'll start with other people's tabs to see how they're doing it, I find easier ways for me to play it, and that's how I end up doing it. Because in the end, you want to do what works best for you. If it sounds right, I say go for it, and don't be worried about doing it exactly the way you think others are doing it, because they may be doing it wrong. I don't know. You got to go back and watch Vito and see how he does it. Even then, there's something to be said about taking a solo and customizing it a little and doing it your way. I prefer to do that, or to see that, and to do that. See others do that when I see them play live. Just to add some more personality and personal touches to the solo. Well, that's it. That's my lesson on how to play the solo from the song Wait. And as usual, I will attempt to answer questions as time allows. Rock on.